Thanks, Robert. Hi everyone and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Kirsten Stephen. I'm an Assistive Technology and Additional Support Needs teacher here at Call Scotland. This afternoon's session is slightly different as I was due to be joined by Linsey Miller this afternoon. However, Linsey is currently unwell and we wish her all the best. She did very kindly offer to provide me with a recording in place of her being here live, so I'm going to play her recording shortly. Just a little bit of background on Linsey. She is a primary practitioner working in a specialist resource in Falkirk. She's been working hard over the last few years on the integration of iPads in her classroom. Linsey presented for us at our annual ASL and Technology Conference in June on this very subject, and she's currently conducting a study around the use of AAC and iPads, which is how this webinar came about today, and you'll hear a bit more about that shortly. Today's session is being recorded and the recording link will follow today's webinar by email for those of you that are not able to join us live. I would ask you to please ensure that your mics remain muted, and if you don't wish to be in the recording, then I would ask that you please pop your camera off now. The webinar is going to run for approximately 20 minutes today. Normally we would have a Q&A session at the end. Linsey has very kindly popped her email address onto her slides. So if you do have any questions, if you into the chat, myself and my colleague will monitor that. Otherwise, please contact Linsey directly via her email address. So if you just bear with me and I will share my screen that has Linsey's presentation on it.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Linsey Miller and I'm here with Call Scotland to talk about my experience of using iPads and AAC in a primary classroom and our journey in getting started with this type of communication support. I'm really sorry I can't be with you all today, so I have made sure to put my email here.
Oh, I know, I've lost sound as well.
On the slide in case you want to get in touch with me with any questions that you might have. So first of all, I really just want to give you a very brief introduction about me. I am a teacher of ASN in Falkirk Council. I previously
seems to be when I mute.
Taught in mainstream. I work in a specialist autism provision. I have experience working with multiple diagnoses in my learners, obviously autism, but also things like dyslexia and ADHD, for example. Before I was a teacher, I was a computer programmer and a website designer, so I guess that's where a lot of my interest in this aspect of pedagogy comes from. So I have some accreditations. I'm an MCE from 21 to 2025. I was a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. I've actually put that on hold. I've not reapplied this year, and that's because, as you can see from my final bullet point, I'm actually studying a master's at the moment at Stirling, and I'm in my third and final year. It's really intense, so I decided just to try and narrow my focus. And that is actually something that I'm also hoping that everyone on this call will be able to help me with later on at the end of the presentation. So first of all, just to make sure we're on the same page, because, you know, people in this webinar could be coming at this from a number of different angles. Some of you might be specialist, some of you might be mainstream, there might be other professions altogether. So what exactly is AAC? So it's augmentative and alternative communication. Augmentative. So It adds to or it supports, it assists in some way. And alternative, so it's providing another way to communicate if speech is limited. So that could be because of something like autism, or it could be a motor impairment, for example. It can be very simple AAC. You don't have to automatically think of symbols and devices. It could be a gesture, it could be Makaton, it could be pointing, or it could be a complex digital device or anything in between. But ultimately, the point is the same: it's to give the learner a voice where perhaps spoken language is difficult or doesn't exist. So when I first met digital AAC, it was quite early on in my career in ASN, and it felt like a battleground when this device arrived in my classroom, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I'm thinking potentially a lot of people who are here today know exactly what that feels like. These were some of the things that were said to me or things that I read. So what do you think about high tech versus low tech? It's like, I don't know. Someone was saying, oh, I prefer the no tech options. I thought, I don't even know what that is. Someone asked me if I'd looked at any mid-tech devices first. The same person who was asking about high and low tech told me that I had to try a low tech device before I could try high tech. And I was told that high tech devices can actually prevent or delay speech. So, first and foremost, you don't have to use low tech devices. First of all, predominantly you will. Your child that you're working with, your learner, will have experience of perhaps PEX symbols or communication boards, classroom visuals, maybe using Makaton. So you've potentially tried low tech, and a lot of times, your speech and language teams will ask you to try that first before they bring in the more expensive digital technology. However, you don't have to. Children can actually go straight on to high tech. Um, in terms of this statement about high tech, preventing or delaying speech, tons of studies that say that is not the case at all. And, certainly in my albeit anecdotal experience of working with several learners now, I can only say that despite my initial nerves about this being the case, the AAC actually improved not just the communication but the speech of the learners. I think it was because it was giving them that language input and feedback repeatedly that they they simply weren't able to get from the people around them, because we're only human and we can't say the word necessarily as many times as they need us to in order to embed it. So what I'd say is, rather than it being this tech or that tech, just think of it like a continuum. That's what I had to do. I had to actually go and research what all these things people were talking about were. And I found this visual which I really liked, so I've adapted it a little bit. So just to explain, because I think it's really important to put this in place before we move ahead. No tech. So no tech is using your body only, so no equipment. So that could be signs, Makaton, eye gaze, pointing, gestures, making sounds. It's available and quick, but obviously has its limitations. Low tech, I would imagine many people are familiar with this. So simple tools that don't have complex electronics or perhaps have no electronics at all. So your symbol boards, your choice boards, button switches for responses, for example. Again, they are affordable, but they can be difficult to adapt, and they don't have that voice generation option. We've got what I suppose is mid-tech, and this was the one that initially really confused me. So that is simple, usually battery-powered electronic devices, but they're not fully computer-based. So voice recorders, symbol displays with buttons that are activated by the user, usually very limited voice input, usually limited to things like recordings, for example, with so limited, vocab, limited flexibility. And then finally, what I'm here to talk about today, or one element of anyway, which is high tech. So that's your digital computer-based communication tools. So for example, iPad using Prologue to Go or Grid, for example. It might be touch or it might be eye gaze systems. It offers a lot more portability and a lot more customization, but obviously is costly, and there is a learning curve involved in that, and it can be daunting even for someone like myself who really enjoys ICT. It can be a really daunting experience. But what I just want to say before moving on is that this continuum is actually, it's complementary. I got this real impression from people initially that it was one or the other. It was this or it was that, or now you're using high tech you won't need. But actually, low tech, high tech, and everything in between, they all work together. So you can really create a very robust communication system. You might have, for example, your child with their iPad device, but you might also have communication boards that you use alongside them that you keep for like core boards for times or situations where unfortunately the iPad hasn't been charged or isn't accessible, or you want to share it with somebody else. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So let's get down to nitty gritty now. I am in no way a super expert. This is something that I am studying now as part of my master's, but what I'm trying to give you here is my checklist of the things that we did that worked, and hopefully helping you learn from the mistakes, which I will freely admit to so that you don't make them as well. So I will also provide this as a PDF document so that you don't have to worry about taking loads of notes as we go through this. So first and foremost, just remember through all of this, this device is the child's voice. So there might be times where you're like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. This feels awkward and clunky. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I always just brought it back to the fact that this device is this child's voice. And so I was going to do my best to help them, to give them the best voice that they can have. Okay, so the day has arrived and the iPad device has arrived. You probably have a meeting with your speech therapist or your speech and language team, whoever it is that supplies it. They'll take you through some of the basics, give you some hints and tips, and then you're all excited and you realise, I don't know what to do next. I know that with the best model in the world, there's only so much that speech and language can do to help us implement it because they are absolutely stretched. So I decided it was time to get some research and practice and see what I could work out. So these are the steps that I looked at when I was setting up this device for the first time. So let's get familiar with the system that we've been given. Go back over the paperwork, search for online tutorials. Just have a play with the device. Sometimes using it is the best way to learn, and actually try using it to communicate. So don't just go into your class and hand it to the child. It is a mistake that I've seen being made and it doesn't go well. Actually get it set up first. So make sure you understand some of the key points of the system. So this could be, for example, customizable voice output. Does it have a color coding scheme? So I've put a little bit of information here. A lot of apps, if you don't know, use things like Fitzgerald's key or Gooson's color coding. So for example, verbs in green, nouns in orange or yellow, for example, and that is something that helps the student to build functional sentences as they go through their AAC journey. Can you adjust the grid size and layout? I'll come to that later. Which types of symbol sets are available? So for example, PICs or symbol sticks, widget, RSAC, ADASAC, which is free and open source, I think might start to appear a lot more in the future. How do you upload your own custom symbols and images? Can you do it? And I know this might sound silly, but you could ask ChatGPT to summarize the key features of the app for you. So just a wee example here, I said to ChatGPT, okay, summarise the key features of ProLocal to Go I should be aware of as a class teacher. So just giving it a very brief description of what you want and who you are, and it actually came out with a fantastic piece of feedback for me. And ChatGPT is free to use and it's not cheating. So I would advise doing that, and then you can actually ask it further and it'll go and do a lot of the web search for you. Just to be aware that, you know, AI can make mistakes, so always double check everything. And finally, don't forget to consider the device itself, what you need to be familiar with. There's going to need updates. What's the charging times like? How long does the battery last for? So on and so forth. Obviously, all of this will be dependent on the app that you've got and the device that you have, although I'm assuming in this situation that it is an iPad. Okay, so let's think about how we're going to set this device up. There may be learners who can work alongside you to co-design the setup of the device. But with the children that I work with, who are new to AAC, it's worked better that I set it up in the first instance and then follow their lead once it's implemented. So the first thing I like to do is go in and archive or hide any content that's not yet appropriate. But don't delete it, that will give you a lot of work down the line. So removing things like ordering drinks at the bar, because our 10-year-olds obviously don't need that. Considering your learner and adjusting the grid size. So you don't want the pages too busy initially, but you also need to balance that out with not having too many subfolders or too difficult to find things. So, you can see the difference here in layout. You can follow the lead or your knowledge of your learner and try and figure out what's best for them, but you can obviously adjust it if it's not working. If you have voice speech output app, then try to use a voice profile that matches the child's, their age, their gender identity, and their cultural or regional background, because then it feels more like it's them who would be talking. And then this next bit's really important, thinking about the custom content that you want to add. So what is custom content? Well, I phoned up the speech and language team and I was like, I got some questions. And this is one of the mistakes that I nearly made that I don't want you to make. I was all worried, like, this child's really into F1, but what if I put the F1 symbols on his iPad and then, he doesn't do any work because he just wants to, press F1 symbols all day. And the lovely lady said to me, if he could speak, what would he want to tell you about? And I was like, yeah, well, of course he'd want to tell me about F1. So why would I not give him the option to have that language? So it seems so stupid now, but just wanted to share that with you. So let's think about what that custom content might be. You know your learner best, so be guided by that. But here's just some examples that might get your brain going. So what are their interests? What do they like for TV? Their music, sports, hobbies, gaming, favourite foods? And generally, if you don't know, find out. Ask other teachers, ask their friends, ask their parents. They'll tell you what the child's interested in if you're not sure. And even if you think you'd know, I'd suggest you ask anyway, because there might be lots of other out of school interests that you don't yet know about. I would always recommend putting on pictures of yourself, like your staff, your SFLAs, their classmates, getting their family and friends to send in photos, so mum, dad, grandparents, brothers and sisters, and of course any pets, because children want to communicate with you about their beloved pets. It might also be useful to have a picture of the family home, of the family car, of the garden, even the child's bedroom. Thinking about your personal routine, so the child's routine throughout the day and the classroom routine, and making sure that you have symbols grouped together that can support all of that communication. And of course, school specific locations, so the gym hall, library, playground, for example. You can make a decision based on your environment and your child's, your context, about whether you want to put actual pictures of these rooms in. That's what I have done, or whether you want to use the symbols for them. So that is obviously entirely up to you. It's a call you can make. If you think it doesn't work, just change it. So think about how you're going to group all this content into nice sections. Don't just clutter the initial page. Don't overload with too much fringe vocabulary, so that's the additional content. Make sure the core words are easily accessible. So it's a bit like setting up folders in your computer to store your work. Think about where you're going to put everything so that it's easy to find. Okay, you've almost got the device set up. You're almost there. But here's some top tips. Again, ask me how I know. So on iPads that use guided access, put in a password and lock the device onto the app, and then blank out any sections of the screen that allow them to exit the app or allow editing. If you don't know what guided access is on your iPad, just Google it. It locks the iPad into the app. If the app allows, so for example, I'm using ProLoco to go a lot just now, you can actually put a password on to edit, and you can hide the edit option. Remember to share the lock codes with anyone who'll have responsibility, so parents, colleagues, the speech and language team. Now that might seem a bit unfair. I'm working with primary learners here. In the future, the child can take responsibility and they will be able to go in and edit it. but we're looking at, primary children in the early stages of communication, particularly with digital. You will end up with a child on YouTube. And in my case, not just that, a child who thought it would be a giggle to delete all of the AAC content. He was having a bit of a moment one day, and just decided, because I hadn't blocked out the edit thing, that he would go in and keep pressing, and just got into the edit section and deleted all the folders and all of the buttons. So take a backup. Back it up onto the device, and then back up the backup. For example, save it onto the cloud, save it onto another device. I always remember he was such a scamp. He handed me the device, like, look what I've done. You get that cheeky look in his face, and I was like, wow. I just went in, put in the backup, pulled it back in, locked the device, handed it back to him, and he was like, woman, can't believe you've thwarted me. So learn from my mistakes. That's all I'm saying to you. The device is set up, ready to go. Find somewhere comfortable that the learner feels happy. It could be beanbags, could be at a desk, whatever works for you. Model a few basics. Maybe talk about how you feel, talk about what's for lunch, and explain it as you're going through it. Oh, Miss Miller feels happy that you have your iPad. You don't have to model every single word at this point, just some of the basics. So, the emotion or the device, or perhaps, for lunch, I'm going to have a sandwich, and choosing the sandwich button, and maybe the lunch and sandwich button. I would suggest practicing it first, because the first few times you do it, it can feel a little bit awkward, but you will get there. Then I suggest, in the same way that you just explored the device, you just hand over the device to the pupil and follow their lead. You know them, so see what they do. I will say, if they wander off with it, let them explore it. Don't hound them. You're going to have all the time in the world to embed this device with them. Let them go and explore it just now. And also let them have time with the device. I think there's sometimes can be the mistake of, oh, look, this is your AAC device. Have a look at that. Okay, now give me it back, because we're going to get on to work. Don't do that. That's their language now. You wouldn't take a child's voice away from them. You can't. You should be able to. So don't take their AAC away. It's time to start teaching them how to use it. And do remember, there is going to be a settle-in period, where you will hear the same button pressed behind you 50 times. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to, cause a lot of issues in the class. I promise you, the novelty of the newness of it does wear off, and the child will settle into using it. And just setting basic expectations, taking care of your device. Don't leave it on the floor, for example. Within the school, making sure that any staff who commonly interact with the learner first and foremost are introduced. You can then feed it out wider to explain it to other members of staff. Of course, fellow pupils and classmates, perhaps explaining to them, if they're not familiar with it, what this device is, why it's not a toy that they can take, particularly if you're in a younger class. This is not a play device, this is this child's communication. Maybe if the child has a trusted friend, you could show the friend how the device works, and they could use it to communicate back and forward with their friend to model it. And finally, linking in with the family. This is going to really be key. And this is the one stage that I'm still really working on, and this is actually what I'm working on as part of my master's, is how professionals and family can work together to really embed the use of the device and improve the overall communication. So I'm going to actually put a questionnaire at the end of this presentation, and if you want to fill it in, that would really be appreciated. If you want to leave your information, then I would be happy to get in contact at the end of my master's dissertation year and just share with you the findings we found, what works in engaging families and staff to embed the device. It's a good idea at this point to arrange a meeting with a family to get them in, get them involved, explain to them the basics of how to use it, how they can model into them, so that they can then model to their child how the device is used, and getting over that fear of it, and just instilling the point that this is an educational communication device. And if possible, and I know it's not always simple because our specialists are so busy, but if a specialist from, speech and language, for example, can come along to the meeting, that can be really helpful to answer any questions and dispel any fears too. So now it's time to show the child how to use the device, how to model the use. First of all, make sure they have the device with them at all times. Maybe put a strap on it. In the same way you would take your voice with you, they should be taking their device with them. Choose an area of the day perhaps to begin a modelled use of the device. So I found in my class, doing the how is the weather today, or check in at circle time on your feelings was a really good way. So for feelings, some of the classmates replied verbally. Everyone had a printed sheet with images and text for feelings on it. So for my AAC learners, I chose to use those symbols and put them onto their AAC device so that they had familiarity. So they would be sitting with their device and I would say, oh, how are you feeling today? And then if they didn't know how to navigate to the section with the appropriate responses, I can model with them how to do that, even maybe taking their hand and pressing the button. And then it's really important at this point to give our AAC users time to respond, whether it's touch screen or eye gaze, it's going to take a while to respond. You'll know because you'll have tried it yourself. If you feel you've given them time and they're still not able, they're struggling to respond, then this is a perfect opportunity to model it for them. So, you could talk about yourself. Miss Miller feels happy. So I've underlined the words that you can press. I'm not suggesting you try and find yourself. Miss Miller feels happy. That's a lot to do. Just focus on the core word. Or the classmate said they were bored. Oh, Miss Miller's happy, but Joe is bored. Or you could look at the child. If they look tired, you could say, oh, I can see that Kevin feels tired. And so you're modeling that for them and they will start to pick it up and one day they will begin to use it. It's also really important to model good manners when using the device. One of the things we found, for example, at circle time was that I had a verbal child who was telling me about his weekends, and whilst he was talking, one of my AAC digital users started pressing buttons. He might have been thinking about what he wanted to say or was excited to share it with me, but because he was pressing it, another child with AAC started pressing a button as well. And the little boy who was talking said to me, Miss Miller, that is so rude. He's talking over me. I thought, my goodness, he really is actually. Yeah, that's bad manners. What can we do about that? So I don't ever advocate for taking the device off the child. It might be really tempting to be like, oh wow, that's rude, that's enough of that, let's move that. But this is their voice. We cannot take it away, we should not take it away. So what we found worked was actually asking them when they weren't speaking, if they were feeling tempted, to just turn the iPad over on their laps until they're ready to use it, and to put their hand up or in some other way show you that they would like to speak. I think that, turning it over in their lap just takes away the temptation to press the button, particularly when they're very excited about having this ability to communicate with you. And I think it's also really important to just plan in 1 or 2 short burst direct teaching activities. I've got an example on this slide and then a few images on the following slides to hopefully kind of boost your imagination with what you can do. So I'm just going to ask now that Christine can hit play on the video for me.
Oh,
Slide just gives us some examples
just
of
just going to
ways that we
skip on
could do direct
because
teaching. You can see
got
we've
to get
got
through
things
Linsey's
like
slides and I'm
using
looking at the time.
activity boards that could introduce shapes and colours and where they sit within the layout of the AAC device. Or if you're in a classroom that's very sensory, a bubble sensory activity, and having feelings and descriptive words on the screen, making sure that you've got those words available. Now that we've introduced the device, it's really important to embed it into our practice. So this is about keeping up the momentum with modelling and encouraging any support staff in your room to be doing the same. Picking 1 or 2 ideas for direct modelling, like we've just covered, direct modelling and directed learning, and you try them for at least a week. It's going to take probably a couple of weeks to embed each thing. Some will embed more quickly than others, but once you feel something is becoming embedded, then try adding something else. But one thing at a time, don't overwhelm yourselves. If you're working with this child on phonics or common words, then you could perhaps create a section with the pupils learning words in it. You can also use the app to make up social stories, to co-create them with your learner and then take screenshots and print them out. And this is what I mean about using different types of AAC complementary. So a printout of a social story that was created on, your app is low tech, but is a very helpful way to have the social story to hand as and when needed. The final thing to remember is that this isn't static. In the same way that spoken language evolves as you develop, so should the AAC device. So it's kind of a loop. You're assessing, thinking what's working well, what's not going so well. Are we missing anything? And then how can we fix it? Or maybe there's an event coming up. Maybe the child's going on holiday. Maybe it's the school holidays. You've got a class trip, school fair. This is a perfect time to think about adjusting your device. So you're working on a new topic, bring in the new words. You've noticed that the child's got a new interest. Add a new section. New people have joined the school or the class. Make sure to add them. Maybe you've got a transition coming up to a new class or a new person joining the room, then that's a good time to create a social story and add in the relevant vocabulary. Of course, as the child growing up and becoming more independent, that's a time to be adding in new vocabulary too. And simply because their AAC skills are developing, maybe it's time to adjust the grid size or unarchive some of the sections and start to think about building fuller sentences. These videos are just short videos that show for professionals and for families how you can be modelling AAC and the importance of immersion of AAC and encouraging the child to pick it up. Thank you so much for coming along to my part of the webinar today, and I hope that this has been helpful to you on your journey. As I said, I'm sorry I can't be here, but if you have any questions, here is my email address. I have also shared 2 QR codes here. The first one is my question.
So Linsey's kindly put a link to her questionnaire there and also her downloadable PDF. So it was a very comprehensive introduction on Linsey's journey. And as she said, she is more than happy for people to reach out with any questions that you might have after joining us today or watching on catch up. So thank you so much to Linsey for recording, and I have passed on my thanks to her already for that. If anyone would like to reach out to her, please do so. She's more than happy. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll be back next Thursday with a mind mapping webinar. Sorry, couldn't get my words out. So thanks very much and have a good evening, everyone.